All right, everybody, we'll just wait for everybody to get in. Hopefully, y'all having a great Sunday or Saturday, I should say. Looks like we've started, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So, before I start the event itself, I'm just going to pop in the information that I have for you all today. So, in a moment, I'll ask that you refresh the video, and this should allow you to see the links. I have an article. Actually, you know what? Instead of putting it where I normally put it, I'm going to put it right up at the top. So give me 1 second, and we'll get started. It's going to be right up at the top. So we're going to go over just a tiny little bit of the Suez Canal event that's happening right now, that ship that's blocking everything. And I think you'll see this is another one of these like signs and wonders type of a situation. You know, we discussed in the last live stream that I did about this, that there's a tendency for the universe, the creator in the universe, to speak to us in many different ways. And the situation that's happening right now in the Suez Canal, I don't think is an accident. I think there's a lot being communicated. So we're going to go over that. So before we get started, my name's Justin. I run and I founded Stones in the Storm, stonesinthestorm.com. If you refresh the stream, then you'll see a link up at the top entitled an article that we produced yesterday entitled "Ever Given Suez Canal Incident a White Hat Operation." So go ahead and refresh. And while everybody's coming back, I'll also see if I can take a few questions at the end. I got a lot going on right now. I've got a lot of editing to do here in the next day or so. So I won't be able to have too much time to talk with respect to taking questions, but I do want to take some questions. So hello, everybody. If you want to sign off in the chat on YouTube, feel free to do so. I will take some questions here in a little bit. I'm also going to be doing an interview, it looks like, with Jordan Sather here on Monday. I don't know if that's going to go live or what the situation is, but as soon as I find out some specifics, I'll let you all know. Okay, so if you aren't familiar already with the situation, I believe it started early last week. I don't know exactly when it started, but it started early last week, and there was a situation in the Suez Canal where a ship named Evergreen, with a big company name, I believe the company name is Evergreen, got stuck in the Suez Canal. And it's been an event that there's a lot of interest in this event. It's caused a lot of issues with trafficking of goods. And I don't think it's an accident that there's a lot of significance, we might say, with what's happening here. So I just want to, oh, you know what? Let me make sure. Is my mic connected properly? Hopefully y'all can hear me. Give me 1 second. Apologies. Yeah, it is. Okay. So what do I mean? Well, if you look at the article that I posted in the description, there's a list of some things happening. So I'm just going to read this list just to put some facts on the table so we can begin our discussion about what the possible meaning of this is. So 8 tugboats are working to try to free the large container ship, which is stuck in Egypt's Suez Canal. The marine traffic has halted, although the marine traffic has halted through one of the busiest waterways in the world. About 10% of the world's marine trade passes through the canal. The ship's name is Evergreen, which at 400 meters is almost as long as the Empire State Building is tall. The 224,000-ton vessel sailing under a Panama flag was en route to the port of Rotterdam. Shipping rates for oil product tankers have doubled since the incident began. Okay, so just reading that, I actually realized that there's a couple other connections. So let me just make sure, because I don't want to tell you guys something that I haven't made sure I know what I'm talking about here. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to go through and read some questions, but before I do, I just want to share with you what just popped in my head before I lose it. So Rotterdam sounds a lot like Rodham. Hillary Rodham Clinton, Rotterdam. Interesting connection. And also, if you think about the size of the vessel, 224,000 tons. If you're familiar with the symbol, the astrological symbol for Jupiter, which is the Roman god, basically the king of the gods, the king of the Olympians, the Grecian equivalent of Jupiter is Zeus. And the symbol for that is something that looks a lot like a 24. Let me see if I can pull it up. I can actually show you Jupiter astrology. And let's see here. Yeah, okay. I'm doing this kind of real time, guys. I didn't necessarily have a lot prepared. I had one of these moments where I just wanted to post a little something on social media, and I had like a million different connections pour into my head. And I just decided, you know what? I bet you this would be something cool to share with my audience. So let me just hop on. So you're going to get a little look behind the curtain for how does one actually explore meanings and symbols and things of this sort. So let's take a look. So I'm going to share my screen here. And as you can see, we have Jupiter. This is the astrological symbol for Jupiter right here. Now, what does that look like? Doesn't it look like a 2 and a 4 smashed together? Isn't that interesting? So why do I mention that? Well, I'll just leave this up for a moment. A minute ago, when I was reading from the article, I'll tell you what, let me see if I can do this. Pull this out. And I'll have this image up here next to the screen. I think you guys should be able to see this. Let's see, what does it look like on YouTube? Yep, there it is. Okay, I'm gonna get the whole screen in a screen effect if I'm not careful. Okay, so the reason I mention this is because look, on the ship is 224,000 ton vessel, and it just so happens that the symbol for Jupiter looks like a 2 and a 4 smashed together. Maybe it's just a coincidence. So when we're doing the symbolic interpretation, I want to offer and remind everybody that there's the kind of science of interpreting symbols is you want to put all of the potential connections that are on the table, regardless of what your personal take on them is. You just want to put them on the table because the very fact that there's a connection itself is something that's objective. It's not subjective. I'm not just deciding that, oh, there's a connection between 224,000 ton vessel and the symbolic symbol for the astrological sign of Jupiter. It's objective, it's there, it exists in the real world. It's not something I made up here. So when we're looking to figure out what the symbols are that happen to be pouring into reality, we might say, given certain events, we just put what we find on the table. Does the symbolic connection exist? Yes, it does. So you just put it up on the table, and then once you put all the symbols you can possibly find, reasonably so, on the table, and then you look and you step back and you're like, okay, what does this possibly mean? And this is part of this whole like science and wonders, Christian, even older Egyptian alchemical symbolic interpretation methodology, this ancient art that has been lost to modern people, that has been reduced to basically fortune telling, which is never what it was meant to be. But this idea that we can, as creatures of the divine, use our minds, the gateway to the divine, to interpret our experience to see what kind of messages the divine is giving us. Because God doesn't just speak to us, you know, when we're praying, he doesn't just speak to us in the word, he speaks to us in an infinite number of ways, conceivably. Okay, so I wanted to put that out there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to read y'all just a short series of questions to try to frame the discussion, and then I'm going to run through some of the meanings at hand, and then we'll take questions. So I'll try to get through this somewhat quickly. So, and by the way, I'll tell you what, I'll even post what I posted on Gab in the description of the video. So So you can go to the Stillness in the Storm Gab, and it's also in, I forgot to mention, it's also in the description. So in the description, I have this section called questions, and this is what I'm about to read from, just to get everybody's minds churning. So are you seeing the symbolic messages? What does Suez spell backward? How does this relate to God and Lucifer? Is the king of the gods of Olympus more like Lucifer or more like Jesus? What does evergreen mean? How does this relate to salvation? What happens when you get saved? What happens in the canal? So what is the activity? What sea does the canal connect to in the south? How does the blocking of the canal with a ship with the word Evergreen on it, which some believe contains trafficked children, symbolically represent an event that happened in Exodus? I'm referring to the Bible here, Moses. Does God speak to us in signs and wonders? Are we ever truly without guidance from the divine? Okay, so let's start to go through this. So what does Suez spell backwards? Well, let's type it. It spells Z-E-U-S, Zeus. Isn't that interesting? Zeus. What is the Jupiter, which is that symbol that looks like a 2 and a 4, mind you? The Jupiter is the Roman version of another god that the Greeks named Zeus. Isn't that interesting? What's up with that? Well, for those of you who are familiar with my series on Into the Storm about the ultimate plan of the Draco, in the second season, I have the last 3 episodes are about Lucifer symbology, basically, that we see this Lucifer symbolism all over the place. And what we traditionally think about Lucifer is not necessarily the full breadth of symbols. So there's, a lot of stuff to talk about here. What I want to mention here is that Lucifer is a kind of juxtaposition to God or Jesus. So there are 2 personifications here. We have Jesus, who is the divine Son of God, the Son of Man, who is the revelation of God, the universal Father, to man. So we need this. And part of what the whole idea of that the only way to the Father is through the Son means is that as human beings, we can't really conceptualize the infinite magnitude and allness of God. So part of the way we do that is through a personification, and Jesus helped reveal that, amongst many other things that Jesus did. So when we are thinking about what's the relationship, the question, how does this relate to God and Lucifer? Is the king of the gods on Olympus more like Lucifer or more like Jesus? Well, what I'm asking here is a character question. What kind of character is Zeus? Is he a Jesus-like character? Is he a Zeus-like character? Well, if you think about, I'll ask you this question. What kind of a character is Peter Pan? Which is one of the movies I broke down in this episode. It was the last one in that season, season 2. Well, Peter Pan is like a spoiled child, right? A child that refuses to grow up, a child who is immortal. What is Zeus like? Well, Zeus is very similar to a child in the sense that he's a being who wants to claim dominion over a world, who is immortal and has a kind of rabble of lost souls around him. So what I'm putting forth to you here is that Zeus is essentially a different version of the Lucifer concept. Now, for those of you who don't know, they're in the Urantia book, they do they spend like 2 papers, actually I think 3, on this concept of Lucifer, or more to the point, the character of Lucifer, like who is Lucifer and the Lucifer rebellion. Well, they expand on the Christian story, you might say, of Lucifer to suggest that Lucifer had an agenda. And essentially, the agenda of Lucifer was to create a kind of never land where he could rule over the beings that he happened to deceive and conscript into his lost boy type scenario. Except when you rule as the self, because that's what Lucifer did, basically. He basically placed himself in the throne of God. He positioned himself in a situation where he wanted beings to worship him as if he was God. So he tried to replace God, literally, like a megalomaniac. And when you do that, because you try to claim power through dominance and control, then you end up becoming a tyrant, even if you started off as a really good guy. Now, what's interesting about the story of Zeus is he killed his father, Kronos, the god of time. And when you kill the god of time, what happens symbolically? Now you escape time and you become immortal. Now, what's interesting is that when Zeus killed his father was also a tyrant. And so in a certain point in the story of Zeus versus Kronos, Zeus is a kind of heroic character. He's the child that frees his brothers and sisters who were literally eaten by Kronos. And his brothers are Hades and Poseidon, and Hera, and I forget, Hera obviously being a sister, and I think there was another one. So the point is that Zeus used his own personal willpower to free his brothers and sisters, and then the people, the human race, from the clutches of a tyrant named Kronos. But then in the process, because he didn't submit himself to the all God, the God in heaven, the Father of all things, the Creator, he became a tyrant himself. So Zeus and Lucifer are very similar. So when we have this question of how does this relate to God and Lucifer? Well, if the Suez Canal is, the word Suez is Zeus spelled backwards. So you might say it's the reflection of Zeus. And what happened in the several thousand years ago, allegedly in the Bible, is that the Red Sea was parted by a prophetic being, Moses, basically, right? Somebody who was working with God. And so the Suez Canal is kind of like the word Suez is the more, you might say it's the reflection of the opposite of Lucifer, instead of the one who blocks and comes in between God's children and God. The opposite of Zeus is Jesus, somebody who actually acts as a bridge. And what is the Suez Canal? But it's a bridge between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. So that brings us to the next question. What what sea does the canal connect to in the south? Well, it connects to the Red Sea. So it's very similar. It's a symbol related to the parting of the Red Seas. All right. So what happens in this canal? Well, trafficking happens. Not necessarily child trafficking. Well, I'm sure it does, because child trafficking is kind of like a global problem. But what also happens in the canal is just trafficking of goods. Goods and services are trafficked. So if we look at the symbolic allegory of what's happening in the Suez Canal right now, is that the trafficking of goods has stopped. Let's just imagine, for the sake of argument, that there are actually children there. There are actually children on the ship that are being trafficked. Or let's just say even better, let's say that there are illegal goods, contraband being trafficked, just to make it really PC for YouTube, because, they're going to get all pissy, I'm sure, with me. Then what has happened? Well, when there's a divine intervention, when the children of God are being rescued by a prophet like Moses, did he not save the children of God? Just like the ship, the Evergreen, is shaped, and the Evergiven is acting as a way to stop trafficking, to stop the enslavement of children, right? To stop the trafficking of illicit goods. Hopefully y'all are following me here. Okay, so to pull back from what I just stated, to try to just make it clear here, what I'm suggesting to you is that the Evergiven ship, with the words Evergreen on it, which we'll break down in a minute, is acting as an intervention to stop the trafficking of goods across a canal that is symbolically associated with the Exodus. Okay, so what does Evergiven and Evergreen relate to? Well, what does Evergiven mean? Think about the quality of ever meaning always, forever, right? Very close to the concept of eternal, meaning it's always going to happen. If you live forever, what does that mean? It means that you're going to be immortal, that you're never going to die. So it's like life everlasting, right? So if it's ever given, then that concept of ever given, what is the being that we know of in the universe that is always giving, right? It's a deity. It's the deity. It's God. And the Son, Jesus, is also associated with this concept of ever giving, right? So there's the first symbolic association, ever given. That's the name of the ship. Then we have evergreen, What does evergreen mean? Well, it means that there is life everlasting. When you think of the concept of evergreen, an evergreen tree is a tree that never dies. It is always green and alive and vital, even when it gets dark, even when it's the harshness of winter, the evergreen tree is still blossoming with life. Isn't that an interesting symbolic association? Do you think that stuff's getting a little dark right now in the world? Do you think that there might be a situation where the cabal are working their hardest to stamp their heel on the races of men and women on this planet, and that it seems really dark right now? And yet we have a ship that is named Evergiven, with the words Evergreen on it, that is blocking the flow of traffic and illicit goods through the pathway that Moses carved to part the Red Seas. Okay, so there's those symbols. So the other thing to keep in mind here is we obviously have the connection of Rodham, right? So I mentioned earlier that Hillary Rodham Clinton, and it happens to be going to Rotterdam. They sound very similar, don't they? And HR3C, I believe. Let me just make sure I got that right. Let's see. Again, I put a lot of what you're hearing now in the article that's in the links. I did not put what we're talking about now because it happened to come to me in kind of like a, flash of insight before I got on. So what I'm saying now, all of the stuff I'm saying now isn't necessarily reflected in this article, but I'm going to take this video, I'm going to put it in the article. So by the way, and some of the symbols that or the things that I'm talking about now were not my research. A lot of this came from We the Media on Telegram and other places on Telegram. Oh, my computer's almost about to die, so probably only got about 10 minutes, but so I'll try to be pretty quick. So what's interesting is that the tugboat trying to help is the H3RC, and there's another tugboat called Baraka 1, and another one is called Mossad, Mosaed. So the boats that are coming to help to continue the trafficking are all call signs, or might be not a call sign. It's a name of the ship. Well, that I know for sure. It's the name of the ship. These names of the ship are H3RC, we have Mossad, and we have Baraka. Isn't it interesting that these things that are coming to help to continue the trafficking are also words that are associated with three people in the world that have been accused of the participation of child trafficking? And some people think that there's child trafficking happening on this ship. Pretty interesting, isn't it? Okay. And then let's see. What else did I want to say here? I actually think that, salvation. So one of the important things to consider about salvation. So if you ask yourself, like, what is the mechanics? What is the science of salvation? What is actually happening? Well, God is a singular being. So let's establish this first and foremost, that when we think of the concept of technology, we're actually talking about the technique, the method by which God saves his children. And you might be asking, well, what is he saving them from? Well, this is something that was beautifully expressed in the Urantia book, although I'm pretty sure it's expressed elsewhere. So it's the idea that if free will is real, then we as beings have the choice to participate in the unending adventure of creation that God has created here, the ultimate adventure, as I like to refer to it, or we don't. And when we don't want to participate, then we are lost, you might say. In a lot of ways, we were designed to participate in the grandest adventure of all time, which is to seek for, know, and strive to be like God. And then we get to participate in the workings of God here on earth, in our own lives, in the lives of our community, and then, in all time, we get to leave a legacy. And I've talked a lot about this in my show, Into the Storm. So when we talk about the concept of salvation, when you are saved, you believe in the concept of God, and that you try to seek for, know, and strive to be like God. And that is symbolically referred to as a baptism, as a rebirthing. So baptism is associated with coming through the waters. What happens when you're born? You pass from your mother's waters into the world. You are birthed into the world. So the concepts are symbolically and etymologically related. So to get really down to it, what we're saying here is that the idea, the mind, where you participate in the adventure of seeking for, knowing, and striving to be like God. It is activated by the belief that you are a son of God. And when you believe in the concept of God, when you treat it as if it was true, and then use faith to hold that and use your life experience to continue to see how the truth of the belief in God and the concept of God and you as a son of God is actually true, then you develop and accumulate the riches of heaven, which is wisdom and mastery. So what's interesting about the truth, and this is something I'm probably going to try to work into these episodes I'm working for Into the Storm right now, is that it's sticky. The truth sticks together. So when you believe in the truth, with the concept of belief with respect to a technique, when you believe something, you are assuming that it is true, but you may not even know. Like there's a lot of people who believe things that they don't know if they're true, but they treat these ideas as if they are true. And if they are true, then through the process of faith, meaning that you are walking through life as if this thing is true, then it will start to stick to other truths and you will gain knowledge and wisdom. And then that wisdom will enhance your life. And then you as a soul, you as a being through choice, create a vessel, a body, a ship that then you can use to, let's say, you can use your mind, which creates wisdom, which creates the soul. And then that soul begets to become more and more like God, which therefore, when you become like God, you become like an eternal being. You get life everlasting. So that's the kind of technology. I know I went through that like really quickly. I don't got much time. But to round all that up, what I'm saying is that when you believe in God, it's not just this like thing like you're stating a political affiliation. It's not just you're saying I'm with this team. It is literally a type of divine technology. It's a divine technique that makes you identify, because you identify with the things that you believe in, and that changes you at a physical, mental, and spiritual level. And when you believe in this concept, you believe you're a son of God and you strive to seek for, know, and be like God, then you gain righteousness. You gain the ability to have wisdom and do things rightly, do things correctly, do things that will actually produce the results you intended and work good in the world. And that will actually give you the ability at a soul level. It'll create a vessel being a ship, but also being a container where the cup, the grail, the life everlasting can be poured in, which is your search for truth and whatnot. So your belief in God is, especially if you use faith and you're using your mind to constantly expand that concept, not just dogmatically believing in it, but actually using thinking, critical thinking, the philosopher's stone, as I like to refer to it, then that literally gives you the ability to, across time, become more and more like God and therefore gain life everlasting. Now, the interesting thing is if you don't do that, and the universe gives you a lot of time to try to figure it out, then you can't survive across time. Because if you identify with untruth, which is something that is unlike untruth, so you remember the truth is something that's sticky. Well, lies are the reverse. Lies like to separate, they divide. And so if you're identifying with a lie, if you're, this might be a little triggering for some people, but if you're an atheist, then the concept of atheism is fundamentally untrue. This is something I'm working to prove right now in my series. So if you're interested, check out Into the Storm. I'm actually going to see if I can get an opportunity to post it on this YouTube channel. And that eventually, when you identify with untruth, that is how you go insane. And across time, then you literally just start to kind of dissolve into the background energy of the universe, something like that. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed that. I'm going to take a look to see if there's any questions in the stream before I go, because I've got maybe like 5 minutes of stuff left here. So let's see. Let's see. Yeah, Zeus, DS God, exactly. Yeah, really. Oh, you guys really nailed it. Looks like you guys got a lot of cool symbolism in there that you've broken down already. Yeah, it's going to be biblical, exactly. This idea that it's going to be biblical, we're living it right now. I mean, what's the etymology of the word biblical? Pretty interesting. Well, I don't really see any questions, so cool. I'll just leave it here. Yeah, the birth canal. It's another good one. Free speech warrior. The good points. What is the birth canal? It's the thing that you're birthing through. Where do you come from in your mother? The womb. What do you have to pass through to get to the world? A canal. It's the birth canal, the Suez Canal. So is it like the canal where things that are of the world become like God? Kind of interesting. What's around the Suez Canal? It's the pyramids of Egypt. And so there's a whole lot of symbolism there. You know, what's on the back of the $1 bill? I don't know if y'all know that, but the Great Seal of the United States is not necessarily a satanic symbol, although it was hijacked by Satanists. So when you think about, you know, who these bad guys are, you got to remember that they're not original. One of the costs, one of the prices that you pay for being a slave to the dark one is that you can't really be creative because you're in fear constantly. So these people don't really invent anything. They just steal symbols, and symbols are themselves neutral. So the original design and purpose of the symbol of the pyramid was the building of man to create a pathway to God, to create a stairway to heaven. And so, yeah, there's a lot there to think about. So, all right. Well, I only got like literally 2 minutes. So thanks so much, y'all, for watching. I really appreciate the opportunity to let me kind of spell out my ideas here. None of this was scripted. I just kind of unfolded it. So yeah, really thank you. If you appreciated this work, I really could appreciate your support. Go to stillnessinthestorm.com/donate. You can become a subscriber right there. And you can also go to Subscribestar and become a subscriber for as little as the price of a cup of coffee. You can really help like make this work possible and a bunch of other work. It'd be really cool if I could have enough support to hire an editor, because I'm only really able to produce like, oh man, so little. If I had an editor to somebody to help me with this, there would be a ton more content, because I happen to be blessed, you might say, with an overactive mind, which means there's tons of stuff constantly happening. I can only really spend so much time on it. So thank you so much for all of the support, for the love, for the seeking of truth, you guys. We're in a really amazing time in history. Now things seem really dark, but there's amazing things happening. And I think this, I'll leave you with this. What I just broke down for you should give everybody renewed hope, because at the end of the analysis, the symbols are there. You know, some people can say, you're just seeing stuff that doesn't exist, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, dude, the symbolic interpretation exists. So whether you want to look at it or not, it's there. Like, just because you blind your eyes and you stop your ears to something that's in front of you doesn't mean it's not true. So I think there's a lot to be hopeful for. I think being hopeful in general is one of the many techniques that we as children of the Creator approach him. And that when things seem really dark, that's really when the true tests and the true opportunities as children of the divine get laid out before us. And then we get to love each other. We get to help and make the world a better place. And then from that waste that comes, there can be new life that springs forth and grows forever. So much love. I'll talk to y'all soon. Take care.